everyone! Today I'm going to be doing my February wrap-up. This is going to be extremely casual, more casual than it usually is because it's extremely impromptu. I wasn't planning on doing this. It's like the middle of the afternoon. A lot of my makeup has like worn off at this point, so I know I look a little sleepy under the eyes, but hopefully y'all don't mind that. It's also my first sit-down video that I'm filming since getting these two. Hopefully they're not too distracting in the background. I'm not gonna lie, the first night that I got them home, I love them, but the first night I had to spend with them, because they're so big, they have a sort of human-like presence to them, and it creeped me out a little bit the first night, but now I'm okay with them. Now I love them, and they just be lurking in the background. Hopefully y'all don't mind. As per usual, I'm going to jump into some statistics. So in February, I ended up reading 7 books and approximately 2,303 pages. Of the 7 books I read, 1 was a contemporary, 2 were fantasies, 1 was historical fiction, 1 was a horror, 1 was sci-fi, and 1 was a thriller/mystery. As far as the ratings, I had 1 2-star, 1 2.5 star, 2 3 stars, 2 4 stars, and 1 5-star read. All 7 of the books were physical reads, 3 were adult and 4 were young adult. 6 out of the 7 books were from my library and only 1 was from my physical TBR, which, as much as I love to utilize my library, I feel like I should probably start reading more books that I actually own. And then, as you guys know, I like to go over the years that the different books were released. So we have a 2009, 2005, 2019, 2016, 2019, 2012, and 2020. So the first book that I finished in February was Fairest of All by Serena Valentino. This is the first book in the Villains series, which is basically a series all about the different Disney villains. This one obviously follows the Evil Queen, and I actually did a full dedicated review video for this book, so if you want to learn more about this and my thoughts on it, then I will leave a link to that up in the eye in the corner, which I definitely forgot which corner it's in, but I think it's that one. Just to sum up my thoughts a little bit here, I would say it was good, I enjoyed it, but it wasn't great. I then picked up The Book Thief by Markus Zusak. This takes place in Germany during World War II, and it is narrated by Death, and I think that's pretty much all I have to tell you about this book. If you don't already know what it's about, then you've probably been living under a rock for a while. I'm pretty sure I'm like one of the last people to read this book, but I am so glad that I did because this was my 5-star read of the month. I know I said I wasn't going to really mention ratings on my channel anymore, but this book was just 5 out of 5 stars, like one of the best books I've read in a very long time. I was very nervous to read this book for a long time because so many people loved it. I thought that there was no way that it would possibly live up to the expectations, especially because World War stories aren't really my favorite time periods to read books in, but surprisingly this lived up to the expectations / surpassed them. I just don't have enough good things to say about this book, and I would 100% recommend it to everybody. One of the things I did notice though was that on Goodreads I saw that a lot of people had actually DNF'd it because they thought that the beginning of it was too slow. I personally didn't mind the slow parts because I was absolutely fascinated with the idea of Death as the narrator, and he didn't just narrate the story, but he also gave his own little comments, and he was actually quite humorous at times. Also, like how I'm referring to as he as if it's got like a gender, but just go with it. So yeah, if you couldn't tell, I love this story and I don't have enough good things to say about it, but like with any story I really love, for some reason I have a really hard time like putting my thoughts into words as to why I really loved it, so just trust me when I say I really loved this book. And then for Thrillerathon, I picked up The Invited by Jennifer McMahon. I don't know if I said that right, sorry, but this is a adult horror / thriller. More people on Goodreads considered it to be a horror, so that's what I'm categorizing it as. In this book we follow a couple who have purchased a property and they are building their house on it, and then strange things start happening. Tools go missing, they hear like screams in the night, and the wife ends up researching the history of the property and finds out that a woman used to live there who was a witch, and she ended up being hung on the property. So that's all I'm going to really tell you about the synopsis. I'm honestly shocked I even told you that much because I always feel like horrors and thrillers you should go into them blind. But as far as my thoughts on this book, I'll be honest, this is kind of a mediocre read for me. I'm honestly having like a really hard time recalling my thoughts on this book. That's how kind of forgettable it was for me personally, and I feel like that sounds really bad, and I didn't by any means hate this book. I still thought it was a good book. I just didn't think it was that great, so I can't really summarize my thoughts that well, but if you want to hear my thoughts like as I'm reading this book, I did do a full reading vlog for it, so again I will leave a link to that up in the eye in the corner if you want to watch that and hear more of my thoughts as they happen, because I just can't seem to recall them very easily. I guess this wasn't a very memorable book for me. I then picked up Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. This is an adult sci-fi slash thriller. Personally, I would consider it to be more of a sci-fi, but depending on what you consider to be a thriller, that's up to your own interpretation. In this book, we follow a man called Jason, and he lives a pretty normal life. He's married, he's got a kid, he lives in this apartment, and one night he goes out for drinks at a bar with a old friend slash colleague, and then when he's walking home, he stops and gets ice cream for his family, and he's walking home to have dinner with them, and he ends up being kidnapped and taken to this weird building and getting knocked out, where he then wakes up in another weird laboratory looking building, and there's all these people talking to him as if they know him and he should know them and know what the heck is going on, but he has no idea what's happening, and so he escapes out of this building and goes back to his apartment, but it's not his apartment anymore. The furniture is different, the locks are different, and his wife isn't there, and it's all just very strange. You really have to read it to find out what happens, but I actually really enjoyed this book. I had never had any interest in reading this book before I picked it up, and the only reason I did was because it was the group book for Thrillerathon. Otherwise, I probably would have never picked this up. One of the things that I really liked about this book, I'm not sure if it's considered a spoiler or not to mention, so if you're really sensitive about spoilers, then mute the video until this book disappears. But what this book deals with is the idea of a multiverse and billions of other parallel universes and parallel versions of ourselves living either slightly different or drastically different lives, and I have never really read a book with that concept before, and I really enjoyed it in here, and I thought it was really well done. Some of the more sciencey parts of it did go over my head, but for the most part I was able to keep up with what was going on, and I didn't find it confusing at all, and it was just really interesting, and I enjoyed the little twists and turns throughout it, and also his writing was really easy. It flowed really well, and yeah, I overall just really enjoyed this, and I would definitely recommend if you like sci-fi books. As for the next couple of books I read, I'm gonna have to just put the picture on the screen because my cat has taken up residence on top of those books. So the next one that I ended up reading was Someone We Know by Sherry LaPena. This is another adult thriller novel. In this book, we basically follow a whole neighborhood or one street of people, and there's this one couple that the wife has gone missing and the husband reports her missing, and then her car ends up being found in a lake and her body is in the trunk and she's very obviously been violently murdered. And so we then just kind of follow all of the different neighbors. We get a lot of different perspectives in this book, and we just see them wonder who it was that killed this neighbor, and there's also these other little plot lines happening, the one son of one of the people has been breaking into people's houses and sending out emails off of their computers, and then there's this other kid that's got an alcohol problem, and I don't think it's a spoiler to say that everybody be having an affair in this book. That's every Sherry LaPena book ever has that in it. But this was my fourth Sherry LaPena book, and unfortunately I think I'm probably done with this author at this point because I just didn't really like this book. This is the third book of hers that I've read that I've just been kind of disappointed in. There was only one book by her that I did really enjoy, and that was Stranger in the House, but other than that, the other three that I've read have been not that great, and this one was probably the most disappointing of them all. I ended up predicting the ending less than halfway through the book, which is pretty disappointing, and even though I thought I knew the ending, I really wanted to be wrong because for some reason I really want to like this author, but I just don't think she's really for me. One of the things that I also mentioned in the vlog that I have linked up in the corner for my Thrillerathon video, one of the things I mentioned in there was that Sherry LaPena likes to put red herrings in her stories, but sometimes for me I feel like they are very forced and very obvious, so you obviously know that it's not them even though she's trying to trick you into thinking it is. And I feel like in this book she did it so many times that you were just able to weed out the different characters and basically just using the power of deduction find out who it was that did it. So that was just pretty disappointing for me, and honestly for most of the novel, even if at the end she would have shocked me and it would have been somebody different, I just wasn't that invested throughout. It didn't really feel like a thriller book, and I actually did look on Goodreads and more people considered it to be a mystery than a thriller, and I feel like that's probably a better genre for it to be in because it just didn't have a lot of the kind of suspenseful, thrillery elements that you'd usually get in a thriller. So overall I was just pretty disappointed with this, and yeah. The next book that I picked up was Wonder by R.J. Palacio, I think is how you pronounce the author's name. I really wanted to read this book whenever the movie came out like a couple of years ago, but I never ended up picking it up because I knew it was a book that would like ruin me. It's just one of those books that you know it's going to be like heartbreaking, and so I never ended up picking it up. And then for some reason I was really drawn to pick it up from the library this month. I have no idea why, but I read it and I'm really glad that I did because it was a really lovely story. It definitely did have a couple moments of almost making me cry. It didn't quite do it for me, but it almost did. But yeah, it's just a really, really sweet story. I wasn't really sure whether to consider it to be a young adult or a middle grade. I ended up going with young adult because I feel like there were a couple moments of like more young adult content that wouldn't really be appropriate for middle grade books. But overall, I do think that it's a great book that everybody should read. I think it has a lot of good meaning behind it, and overall I did really enjoy it. And then the final book I read in February was Come Tumbling Down by Seanan McGuire. This is the 5th book in the Wayward Children series. I have explained the plot of this series every time I've mentioned one of these books, which has been a lot of times, so I'm not going to repeat it again here, but just know that the first book, called Every Heart a Doorway, was an amazing story, and you should definitely go and look it up and read it if you haven't already. So this was the 5th book in the series, and as per usual, reading any of these books, I was pretty nervous going into it because these books have been very hit or miss for me. Like I said, I loved the first book. That was definitely my favorite, like 5 out of 5 stars. But then the second book I just thought was okay. The third book I liked. The fourth book I really liked, but unfortunately this one was another kind of miss for me. I just thought this one was okay. This is probably my second least favorite out of the series. I don't know why, I just didn't really connect with this book. I think it's because all of her books in the series are pretty short, and in some of them I think she does it really well without making them feel rushed or anything. She's able to just fit a lot into a short number of pages, whereas with this one I felt like it needed to be longer to fit everything that happened in this book. Like, looking back on it, I'm like, did all of that happen in one afternoon? Because there was literally like no sense of time or like pacing in this book. Like, it literally was just like it happened in one afternoon, but I felt like they did a lot of stuff for that to be the case. And also for like the first half of this book, I felt like the author did a lot of telling and not showing, and again I think that was because she was just trying to cram as much information into a short number of pages. So I kind of wish that this book had either been longer or maybe had been split up into 2 books, and we could have seen and not been told a lot of the stuff that happened in this book. So yeah, this was just kind of a disappointing read for me, but like I said, there were still at least 2 books in the series that I really enjoyed, so I definitely will be picking up the 6th one whenever that comes out, probably next year. So those are all the books that I read in February. If you've read any of these books, let me know in the comments. I'd love to discuss them with you. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!
You hear that, Samson?